So, NBA reporter Chris Palmer accidentally highlights something on Twitter that explains more about our society today than you might think. So, we're going to go ahead and get right into it. If this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that sub button. And meme team, you guys ready? Then let's go! All right, so like a lot of other people this week, Chris sent out a tweet in support of the rioters destroying buildings with this picture. And as you can see, Chris retweeted the picture and he wrote, "Yeah, burn that censor down. Burn it all down, man." So he seemed to be kind of happy about it, having a good time. And like so many other people, that was until 2 days later when the rioters came too close to home for him. Having an apparent really short memory, he tweeted this. "They just attacked their sister community down the street. It's a gated community and they tried to climb the gates. They had to beat them back. Then destroyed a Starbucks and now in front of my building. Get these animals the censored out of my neighborhood. Go back to where you live." So it looks like he had a pretty quick change of heart when it was his property that was being threatened. Now, don't get me wrong, there isn't anything funny about the riots and the protests, but the fact that his views came back to bite him so fast, I'm sorry, but that's pretty funny. Now, as odd as this sounds, this is one of the problems that I see with so many of us today, and it shows in discussions surrounding Floyd's death and the riots. Now, since all of this stuff's been going down, I've seen a lot of people who don't seem to have any sympathy for those who have been affected by the riots. To them, they don't really pay it any mind because they could care very little for people's property being destroyed in the midst of everything that's going on. So they're fine with destroying other people's property and burning other people's businesses down to the ground. And now, on the other side of the token, I see some people that don't seem to be all that sympathetic to the death of Floyd or those who are hurt by his death. One reason why is because Floyd isn't part of their family or community and isn't someone that they can relate to. If it was their family that was the victim of injustice in the same way, it would be a completely different story. See, that's just the thing. The fact of the matter is, when we're separated from situations, it's easy for us to be emotionally distant from what's going on and cling to the views that we like the best. But when it happens to us, we're the first to cry foul and proclaim just how much that we've been wronged. That's the problem with having morality that doesn't objectively transcend society. This is a morality apart from God. Because the fact of the matter is, the easiest thing for us to do is to justify our wrongs to ourselves and be hard on others when they rationalize and try to justify their bad behaviors. I mean, just think about it. Why is it that when other people do something that we think is wrong, we call them names and we consider them bad people? But when we do something that's wrong, we say, well, it's complicated. And then we come up with a bunch of different ways to try to explain to ourselves why we were justified in doing what we did. So it's no wonder why we can't have peace on earth, because we're never going to be at a loss for excuses to make us feel better about ourselves. Now, I'd love to say that we can simply make ourselves aware of our own hypocrisy and stick to it, but the truth of the matter is, we can't. Think about what Jesus did on the Sermon on the Mount. He pointed out to people that just because they haven't physically committed adultery, it didn't mean that they were morally perfect. Instead, he told them that if they even looked at a woman with lust, they've committed adultery in their hearts. So what this did, it showed them that if not committing adultery was the standard that you needed in order to get into heaven, then they would still be disqualified from heaven by the same standards that they gave others. And there's several other places where Jesus and Paul warn that you'll be judged by the same standards that you use to judge others by. So if you have to hold up to your standards, this is how you can condemn yourself by your moral standards, because we can't even live up to our own moral standards, whether you know it or not. Now, I'm assuming that you probably don't believe me and you believe that you do live up to your standards, right? Well, there's an old illustration that goes something like this. Imagine that you were recorded every time that you told someone that they shouldn't do something that you consider to be immoral. And it captured every time that you got morally outraged for something that someone else did, and when you said how someone shouldn't have done something that you thought was wrong. Now, let's just say at the end of your life, you meet God and you're awaiting judgment. And now let's say that God pulls out the recorder and tells you that he's not going to judge you by some set of moral standards that you didn't agree with while you were on earth. No. Instead, he's only going to judge you by your own moral standards. The same moral standards that you consider to be fair. The same moral standards that you believed in while you were on earth. And as he starts writing them down on the list, he says that he's going to hold you accountable to the principle behind the claims that you made. So maybe in different ways you said stuff like, you shouldn't tell others how to live their lives, or you shouldn't be selfish, or you shouldn't hurt other people's feelings, or whatever it is. So then say God hands you the list and he says that he's going to hold you accountable to it. How do you think that you did? The truth is, none of us would hold up to our own list. We would all condemn ourselves for even our own standards. See, it doesn't matter who we are. We'll all stand before God to be judged by a set of standards that will inevitably condemn us. But Here's the good news. The message of the gospel is that God took on human flesh and entered into our world by making himself weak and vulnerable to all of the injustice and the violence that we created. He came into our world and lived a perfect life and suffered and died unjustly at the hands of his own creation. So here's what that means for you. Instead of you having to stand before God and be held accountable to your own standards that you made on the tape recorder, he says that he'll trade you. Instead of you getting what you deserve, he took on the punishment and the condemnation for you so you won't have to get what you deserve. And since he lived a perfect life, instead of him getting what he deserved, in other words, no punishment and no condemnation, he says that he'll give that to you as a free gift because he loves you. All you have to do is accept it. So, in other words, you can choose to stand before God based on the life that you lived and be condemned by your own rules and standards, or you can simply accept his free gift of the life that he lived, and you can stand before God as if you fulfilled the standards of perfection perfectly. So, it's really your choice. So, that's the video. Go ahead and let me know what you guys think down below. And the next time that you find yourself cheering on something that you would hate to happen to you, what are you going to say? What do you mean?